I'm joined here today with Dr. Steve Davis of the Everglades Foundation. He is their Chief Science Officer, and Dr. Davis joined the Everglades Foundation in 2009 as a member of their science department, and he became a key voice in the organization's mission to restore America's Everglades. And he's joining us here today to share with us the importance of Florida's wetlands. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Davis.
Thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's wonderful to have you and for us to be able to learn more about the Everglades. So could you share with us a little bit more about the work you do for the Everglades Foundation?
Well, 13 years with the organization now and have had a pretty good sampling of what this organization is about. We are truly about Everglades restoration and advancing the projects that will collectively restore this ecosystem, and that includes the flow from Lake Okeechobee all the way south to Florida Bay. And so our science actually fuels the advocacy efforts that our organization engages in, whether that's in Tallahassee or Washington, D.C. And I think the best example of our successes is getting the Everglades Reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee, getting that planned, getting it authorized, and now we're seeing the beginning of the construction process. So for us, that project is the game changer. That's what the science has shown from the very beginning, and it's just I think a good example of what we do as an organization, taking the science and utilizing that in our advocacy efforts.
That's great. That's phenomenal. And so February, we will be celebrating World Wetlands Day. Could you explain the importance of the wetlands in Florida?
Wow. Florida has such a diversity of wetlands, and in part it's because we get so much rainfall each year. In South Florida, we get upwards of 5 feet of rain a year on average, and much of that, roughly 75% of that, comes during the 6 months of our wet season, our hurricane season. And so that abundance of water on a very flat landscape means that you're going to have areas that are wet year-round. And so those wetlands, depending on where you are in the Everglades, you can have mangroves and seagrasses on the coast. You can have sawgrass marshes and tree islands, cypress domes, just a variety of different wetlands that perform functions that all wetlands are really known for. I think from a climate change perspective, we talk a lot about carbon sequestration. Wetlands are natural sequesters of carbon and storing that carbon, but we've learned over the years that those wetlands need to be kept wet in order to retain that carbon. Wetlands are phenomenal ecosystems at sequestering nutrients at the same time. They take in contaminants like phosphorus and nitrogen in addition to that carbon and lock it into the soils. And so we've used that functional attribute of wetlands to construct treatment wetlands to clean phosphorus pollution running off of agricultural fields. Oh, wow. And a variety of treatment wetlands have been designed and built to even clean wastewater effluent, so from sewage treatment plants. So wetlands also provide that service in addition to providing habitat for waterfowl and fish and amphibians and a variety of other species. They're just really incredible ecosystems and all that they can do, in addition to storing water and attenuating floods. Another attribute of coastal wetlands is storm surge protection. We talk about mangroves and the value that they provide in anchoring our shoreline and protecting us against storm surge. And I think lastly, from just the example of the Everglades and some of the Florida springs to the north, they provide water. They're places for aquifer recharge and therefore are important in meeting our water supply needs. So we really see the gamut of these ecosystem services provided by wetlands in Florida, and just so fortunate to have them.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic information, and like you said, they're just a critical aspect of Florida's environment. And so you touched on this a bit, but that it's been said that the Everglades can fight climate change, and that they are a critical aspect to the future of Florida. I think you touched on this a little bit, but could you maybe explain that a little more?
Sure. Part of it is related to the fact that when wetlands are hydrated and healthy, and also being in a subtropical climate with a year-round growing season, these plants are growing in just massive accumulations. They die back, new plants grow, and that cycle of growth and dieback leads to the accumulation of carbon in those soils. So when you take that sort of local process and apply it across the millions of acres of the Everglades ecosystem, you get an enormous amount of carbon sequestration capacity.
Oh, wow.
And with restoration, we enhance that capacity further. So it's really on a global scale of importance in terms of carbon sequestration. For those of us that are living around the system in South Florida, it's also an important source of elevation. And you think of mangroves as well as these freshwater marshes accumulating organic matter in that soil leads to the vertical accretion of those soils and elevation. Elevation matters in South Florida. When you're living 4 feet above sea level,
Yes.
and you think of storm surges and tidal flooding, every inch matters. And so keeping these wetlands healthy also allows for that maintenance of elevation. Now, one thing we don't know is whether these coastal wetlands can keep pace with accelerated rates of sea level rise. And I think we'll reach some threshold where they can no longer do that. But in that situation, we need to ensure that we have the capacity for those wetlands to migrate landward, because we know that at some point that mangrove shoreline, while it may move, is still going to be important to future populations in South Florida.
Yeah, that's a great point you make. And so could you explain to us the ways in which the Everglades can actually help to mitigate the effects of climate change?
Sure, and it gets back to that that capacity for them to sequester carbon. And what we see now is in the degraded areas of the ecosystem, they're too dry for too long, and those soils actually become a source of carbon to the atmosphere. But through restoration and rehydrating those wetlands for more of the year, then we grow that capacity for them to sequester carbon, and in turn, at that large scale, really make a dent in terms of what we see just regionally in terms of our carbon footprint. So, we're talking on the order of hundreds of thousands of cars equivalent that this ecosystem can help us mitigate.
So what sort of benefits do the wetlands produce for the residents of Florida and our economy?
Well, it starts with our water supply. And as I mentioned earlier, we get upwards of 5 feet of rainfall each year. And if that 5 feet were distributed throughout the year, we probably wouldn't ever face water shortages. The problem is that rainfall comes within a 6-month period of time, and it means that the remaining half of the year is quite dry. So the Everglades naturally was wet year-round and would recharge the aquifer that communities that were developing in South Florida depended upon. We're now a population of 5 to 6 million just along the lower East Coast, and we all depend on this ecosystem for our water supply. So having that water in the Everglades and restoration enhances that, ensures that we have a water supply to make our economy function. If we had to pay additional amounts to provide desalination or other water supply needs, then that would be a burden to the economy of Florida. You think of hotels and tourism and golf courses, and in addition to all the agriculture we have here in South Florida, that all depends on this same water supply that we're talking about. So water is critical, and it really begins there, but it goes beyond that, and that we have a tourism-based economy in Florida. We can't overlook the importance of clean water, healthy waterways, clean beaches, and that's all tied to the Everglades. People come here to fish. The fish in our coastal bays and estuaries all depend on the quality and quantity of water coming out of the Everglades. When you add in the importance of the boating industry in Florida, it's all tied to this ecosystem. And we also know that our real estate values are tied to the quality of the water. And it's not just those that live on the water. If you live near the water, your property values are tied to the health of that ecosystem. We know that our own well-being is tied to the health of the environment and access to the environment. So it's really critical that we protect and restore this ecosystem.
Those are fantastic points. I think we underestimate how far-reaching the effects of the water throughout the state really are.
Yeah, and it's really, even if you don't get out to the Everglades, and I would encourage anyone to get out there, it's important to understand its connection to our state's economy.
So how has Volo Foundation's grant to the Everglades Foundation helped to support your mission?
Well, when you think that we're rooted in science, it starts there, and our increasing emphasis on climate change impacts and the importance of Everglades restoration and mitigating that, the impacts of sea level rise on our coastal wetlands, support of graduate students that we work with in the area of understanding climate change impacts through the Volo Foundation for Everglades Scholarship. We've got our first student, a PhD student at University of Florida, working on that right now, and so that's just been an outstanding resource. But that translates to our education program. The science that we provide, that we distill, goes to the development of the curricula that we implement in our education program, and our policy and advocacy efforts as well. So it really is supporting the foundation of what we do. But it goes beyond the philanthropy. It's also the partnership that we have with the Volo Foundation and connecting us with a larger network of organizations that are focused on climate change and communicating the importance of that to policymakers and just folks throughout the entire community. So we really, really value this partnership.
That's fantastic. I know everyone at Volo Foundation loves to see the results that our efforts are making, that our program partners are able to have these impacts in the community, and we just love being able to help support and uplift our program partners. So we're happy to be a part of it. And so for people who would like to learn more about the Everglades Foundation, where can they go to get more information on the Florida wetlands?
Well, I think the first place to go would be our main website, evergladesfoundation.org. And we've got a variety of resources that focus on our core areas of science, education, and policy. But then digging a little bit deeper, we've got more resources available. Our education program, for example, evergladesliteracy.org, is an outstanding resource for teachers, parents, students, that has all of our freely available curriculum materials that are really run the spectrum from K through 12. And again, those are aligned to state standards and available to teachers. We also train teachers as part of that program. So evergladesliteracy.org is a great resource. I would encourage folks to follow us on social media. We share a lot of information, as does Volo Foundation, on Everglades restoration issues, and we'll provide fact sheets as needed, and a lot of that stuff's available on our website. So, and then certainly reach out to us if you have questions or concerns. We're always available to really make sure that people understand the importance of what's going on.
Yes, we follow your social media and your website, and just put out such a great wealth of knowledge. So it's a fantastic
Thank you.
resource. Absolutely. We're so appreciative of all that you do at the Everglades Foundation in protecting and restoring Florida's critical wetlands, and we're just so happy you could join us today and appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, and we really value this partnership and look forward to continued work together in the future and bringing restoration across the finish line.